Hi you guys, it's me Arden Lee. I am back with another video, and tonight's video, I had something really funny happen to me tonight that I made a post on Facebook about, and I wanted to make a video about it, and I'm trying to think of like what to call it, like what the lesson is behind it. And essentially what it comes down to is, don't limit how wild and magical your reality can be by making jokes about parts of the world as though they're completely unrealistic. Because if you come across someone who does live in this wild fantasy-like part of reality, and you bring up something that happens to be a part of their reality in a way that makes it sound like a joke, like you don't think it's even possible, like it's funny that you're talking about it because like that's the joke, because it's not real. All you're doing is communicating to that person that you don't understand their world, and that you're not cool enough to. I hate to say like, oh, you're not cool enough, but in this instance, like this is exactly what this says. So I'm going to tell you the story. This will make a lot more sense when I tell you when I tell you what happened to me tonight. But essentially that's the thrust of this video is, you know, we live in a world of infinite possibility, and I've noticed this trend of people who will talk about certain things, certain corners of the world, as if they're jokes, as if they couldn't possibly be true. And having been in some wild and fantastical corners of the world myself, I can tell you that when you do that and you talk to someone like me, for whom, you know, these wild things that you're talking about are a reality, like all you do is just like, I'm like, you just kind of prove to me that you're boring, because you're saying that you can't actually imagine this being real for you, and you can't really hang in my world. So I'll tell you the story that happened tonight, which is that I was out at a bar, and I'm talking to this guy, and you know, he's like tall and slim, and he's kind of cute. He's kind of cocky, and he's kind of annoying me, but whatever, he's there, and I'm you know, I'm feeling like talking to him for whatever reason. And he's a little older too. He looks like he's either like late 30s, and like late 30s but a little worse for the wear, or like somewhere in his mid 40s but like super good looking for mid 40s, right? So anyway, so I'm talking to him, and I asked him at one point, I was like, so tell me about what you do, like what's your work in the world? And he goes, I'm a race car driver. And I was like, oh, cool. My biological dad was a race car driver as I was growing up. So there was always like, he had a race car in the garage, and he was always working on the car, and there was all these, you know, sports, you know, NASCAR posters around or whatever. And he was like, oh yeah, like what did he drive? And I was like, he asked what he drove, and I was like, stock cars. So yeah, it was NASCAR, SCAA, and IMSA that he raced for, you know, and he's like, oh, okay. And then he goes, he suddenly realizes that, you know, I know a lot more about this than he does, and that he doesn't really know what SCAA and IMSA are. So he says, you know, I'm just kidding. I'm not really a race car driver. And I was like, oh, well, my dad was, but okay. So what do you do? And he's like, I'm a porn star. And at this point, I already know that he's joking about this too, because it's the same format of the joke as he just told about, you know, being a race car driver. But at this point, I'm like, I'm just gonna go with it. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. My ex-girlfriend is a porn star. He's like, oh, really? Well, what was that all about? And I said, actually, she's one of the pioneers of virtual reality porn. She founded a company. Her business partner built the back end of the technology, you know, the VR cam stuff. And she actually partnered with a cam girl company to teach their cam girls how to use the VR equipment, so that they can have this, you know, get that technology out to the already existing campsite platforms. And at this point, he's like, yeah, I'm kidding. I'm not really a porn star. And I was like, yeah, I figured. So what you're telling me basically is like the wildest fantasies that you can come up with to say that you are things that people who were in my life have already done. And, I'm sure that he didn't anticipate that I would answer this way. I mean, we had just started talking 5 minutes ago at the bar, but what that says is, it doesn't even matter, that, he was talking to me or whatever, but what that says about you as a person is that there are these sectors of reality that are so wild and out there that you couldn't even imagine them being a part of your reality. And why do I want to play with someone who's not playing in the realm of infinite possibility? Like, all you're saying when you do that is that you're limiting yourself, or like why do you think and also, there's naturally a political component to this, because usually the jobs that most people bring up as jokes like this are jobs like the adult performer industry that are stigmatized. There's guys all the time will like joke about being a porn star, or like being a stripper, or being like a gigolo, and that they're saying gigolo because they don't actually understand the industry terminology of escort, or like whatever they'll say. And it's like, it's like, that's really not funny when we've got laws in place like SESTA and FOSTA, which, if you're not familiar with those were bills that were passed under the Trump administration that essentially criminalize certain forms of advertising online and force sex workers to go further underground. This was like why Backpage was shut down and things like that. So basically, there's so much legislation right now that is endangering sex workers. Thankfully, we are getting the talk about decriminalization into the 2020 election sort of collective rhetoric. I believe Elizabeth Warren, and I think Kamala Harris has actually changed her stance. She used to be super anti-sex work. I know I'm going on a tangent, but this is kind of important, so I'm just going to throw it in there. She used to be super anti-sex work, and it looks like she's changing her tune now. I'm still a little bitter toward her, but I'm glad that change is happening. Anyway, so if you didn't know that, you know that now. But you see how knowing that and being informed of something like that and how that's important to me, and someone's like, someone will be like, oh, I'm a male gigolo, or like, I'm a porn star. And I'm like, you're like, that's how you talk about that topic, as if it's just not a part of your reality, And another funny part of this story, this is just another example of that, and it's just funny, so I'll include it in here. He's like, he's doing this thing where he thinks he's, trying to undercut me by he's clearly insecure about the way that I'm holding the conversation, and he's trying to undercut my own confidence by disqualifying me as part of that. Like, and he doesn't even know that I've taught pickup before, and I'm like, I absolutely know what he's doing, whether it's conscious or not. But what he says to me is, he's like, you feel really dominant. You feel really dominating. Like you're like dominating the conversation, and and I think I joked with it. I was like, oh yeah, is that something that you're into? And he was like, well, I would want to be the one dominating you. And I was like, why should I? I was like, what? I said, well, why would I do that when I'm obviously the one who has more experience being a dominant partner? And he was like, you don't have more experience being a dominant partner. And I was like, I will bet you $20 that I have more experience being the dominant partner, and that I can prove it. He's like, what? You can't prove it. I was like, I can prove it with photographic evidence right here. What do you want to bet $20 that I have more experience being the dominant partner? And he was like, okay, whatever. So I whip out my phone, and of course on my phone I have a picture of the article of me with a full page article with a giant photo of me in my dom gear from when I was a dominatrix, from when I was in the New York Post when they outed me as a pro dom for for being part of a house of professional BDSM that was raided and shut down by the NYPD, and for trying to raise the legal funds for my then boyfriend, who was also my boss, to stay out of jail. So that happened to me. I was outed in the New York Post. Most people, I think, who've been following, I talk about it a lot, so most people know. It's like the majority of my trauma, some of my trauma. Anyway, So, so I whipped that out on my phone, and he's just like, wow, okay, yeah. So you were, and it's just like, it's just funny. It's just like, why did you, you know, um, I understand that like not everyone has to play in that world, and not everyone has to like that world, and not everyone has to be knowledgeable about it. But the point is, why the irony? Why are you saying that there are parts of the world that are a joke? Do I go and talk to people and like, do I go talk to normal people and they're when they're like, what do you do? What's your work in the world? And I'm like, oh, I'm a CPA. No, like it just doesn't make sense. So when you do this kind of thing, when you're joking about, parts of the world being seemingly inaccessible to you, then all you're telling me about yourself is that you're not very creative, and you're not very visionary, and you don't dream big. Even if that isn't your dream, it's the fact that you're completely ruling it out, and making it a joke as if it were an impossibility. And you're telling me that you can't play in the realm of the infinite, and if you can't do that, then what are you doing hitting on me at a bar? I understand, like, this dude didn't know who I was. We had been making conversation for under 5 minutes at the point that most of that conversation that I had just described happened. So I get it, but it still boggles my mind, Like, if I'm going to talk about something, I don't know. There's just nothing, like, I don't know. I just don't understand why it's funny. And whenever anyone tells me what they do, regardless, I always approach it with sincerity and curiosity, which is why these conversations end up being pretty funny, because I will absolutely talk to these guys who make these kinds of jokes as though they're being completely serious, as you saw, as I just did, and they usually feel like jackasses by the time that I do that, But whatever it is, it doesn't, even if it's not something that I'm familiar with, I'll ask questions, I'll ask sincere questions, and I'll get them to explain. So it's like, if there's something that I don't understand or that I'm not part of, why wouldn't I want to, learn about that from someone? Why wouldn't I want to approach these corners of reality with sincerity and curiosity? It's, I don't know, man. So, so I know that's like a super specific video topic, but I was just so blown away, by the way that this went down tonight. And it just made me think, and I was just like, what was the issue in that interaction? What would I advise against doing? And it's just this idea that certain parts of reality are laughable, Like, yes, there's cosmic humor in things, and like that's great, like, but the idea that it's really because it's like we're undercutting the reality of other humans. We're basically saying this person's profession is a joke. This person's world is a joke just because I don't understand it. And therefore, I'm going to make a trope out of them. And it just displays a lack of compassion and a lack of empathy and a lack of understanding, a lack of vision. And yeah. And you never know who you're talking to, and you never know what's in their history and what kind of experience in life they've had thus far. And you might end up getting humiliated out at the bar. Sorry, bro. You deserved it. All right. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful or at least fun to watch. And I will see you in the next video.